I've heard a lot of women talk about how young women take feminism for granted. And I don't include myself in that. Sarah said we're young, but I'm 42 and I feel much more middle-aged than young. But speaking as I suppose somewhere between it, my experience is that young women are not disengaged. By the by, I've got to say that I've heard that line about women having opted out of feminism since the 1980s, and I've always wondered what that comment is supposed to achieve. If you're one of the young women who's around and engaged, it seems a bit tough to be criticised for the other women who aren't there, and if you're not around engaged, you're not listening. Regardless, I've never found it difficult to find young women who are passionate about women's rights. Sometimes they talk about it as feminism, and sometimes they don't. But they're working in that long line of feminist activists who insist on change, and I think that's what matters. At Project Respect, where I used to work, we had the opposite problem that you're supposed to have if you're a feminist organisation. We always had trouble accommodating all the young women who wanted to be involved. In the Greens, where I'm involved, I remember a somewhat heated state council where all the young women, many of the young women were arguing against affirmative action, and women my age were arguing for it. When we went out later, one of the young women said, "All these middle-aged women were giving us this really hard time." And when we got over the fact that we were in our late 30s and 40s and someone thought we were middle-aged, we started this conversation with young women. And in the last couple of years, it's been really interesting to learn from them about how they see the world. We were writing them off as not feminist, and we were wrong. I'd argue that if our causes and our organisations are not attracting young women, we should look as hard as those causes and organisations as we do as the women not coming to them. I think one of the great contributions of Barack Obama's campaign for the US presidency was the way it put to bed the idea that young people and a whole lot of other people are intrinsically apathetic. Barack Obama talked to people in terms they understood and offered them ways of acting that made sense. And didn't they take up his offer? I think that's an incredible gift for us as feminists, to realise that people aren't intrinsically distant. They aren't fundamentally engaged. They're just looking for things that make sense. I think one of the planks of patriarchy is to make pronouncements on and police young women. I think one of the planks of patriarchy is to scrutinise and criticise young women. I think one of the planks of patriarchy is to find them wanting, to declare them flawed, to push them to believe they're not good enough, that they need to do more or be more or have more. It's not only young women who experience this, but I think it's mostly young women who experience this. I don't think we as feminists should contribute. If we have a duty then, it may be to make sure that we're not the people Adrienne Rich refers to when she talks of leaders who describe the world as if they're not in it. You're not in it. Young women are there. They're using the great gifts of feminism to build lives that generations of feminists longed for and worked for. We should celebrate the options they have. And I think we should look with new ideas at what they are doing. We should embrace the idea that we won't always recognise the way of being feminist that young women have. I don't mean that we have to give up, that we shouldn't disagree with each other, that we should just accept anything. I'm saying that berating young women for not keeping the faith doesn't get us very far. I think if we could start our feminist conversations asking what young women, or other women for that matter, are doing, rather than talking about what they're not doing, we can again build a robust movement. We can again feel hopeful about women's work for change. I think we live in a profoundly challenging time. Feminism has transformed the way we live our lives. We have choices and constraints of complexity that I don't think other generations grappled with. And feminism is still a tool. It's a way of thinking. It's a hope that we need and will need. With its revolutionary recognition that the personal is political. With its search for connected thinking rather than dichotomies. With its value for each woman and for the collective. With its brave refusal to ignore or trivialise male violence. With its egalitarianism. With its unrelenting hope. With its adaptiveness. It's something I think generations of women will find and further, not out of duty, but because it's It offers them and the world real freedom. I'd like to finish with another quote from Simone de Beauvoir as a comment on the potential of feminism and being a feminist. She said this in another context, but I think it works. That's what I consider true generosity. You give your all, and yet you always feel as if it costs you nothing. Thank you.